One of the key parts of George R.R. Martin's world building for Westeros is his idea of scale. Westeros is huge. The size of cities, the distances between places, the physical landmass, the number of troops in his armies are all on a much bigger scale than the real world and lots of the other popular fantasy worlds. While this method is far from perfect, with there being lots of inconsistencies in George R.R. Martin's approach when you really do stop to think about it, he has created a really deep and fleshed out world lore. Something I often forget being such a huge fan of not just A Song of Ice and Fire lore, but lore in general, is at the end of the day, it is there to support the story being told. So as long as it does that job, even if it's not quite perfect, it doesn't really matter. But, of course, I would rather it make sense. A lot of fans own perceptions, especially those who read the books after Game of Thrones became a TV show, have been warped by the show's interpretation of characters and places. Even I have to admit that even though I read the books before the show, when I reread the books now, sometimes I subconsciously will picture the show's version of Castle Black or Winterfell rather than what I originally pictured in my mind. A lot of that has to do with how well the show brought some of these places to life in a way that has never been seen on TV before. But the issue with this is, Westeros and some of these key locations have been scaled down dramatically for the TV show. For example, Winterfell or the Wall itself, which are tiny on the show compared to their book counterpart, with distances between places even feeling much smaller. So we end up with a lot of fans who don't realise just how huge Westeros and its iconic locations truly are, which for me is part of the magic of Westeros and helps it stand out. So in this video we're going to be taking a look at some of these locations in Westeros, discussing the impact of their scale and how they fit into the world lore. You could see it a mile off, pale blue line across the northern horizon, stretching away to the east and to the west and vanishing in the far distance, immense and unbroken. This is the end of the world, it seemed to say. The thoughts of Jon Snow, A Game of Thrones chapter 19, Jon 3. The wall stretches for around 300 miles from east to west and is approximately 700 feet tall at its tallest point. Made from solid ice, stone and earth, it can be seen for miles around, dominating the skyline. Being made mostly of ice, its colour shifts from grey or blue depending on the weather and the time of day. The top is wide enough for a dozen mounted knights to be able to ride abreast, and it's even thicker towards the base. The wall was made to defend the realms of the first men, with the Night's Watch having reportedly defended the wall against the others and other monstrosities for 8,000 years, since the end of the Long Night. While we cannot know 100% the truth of how the wall was built, it does make sense that magic was involved given the sheer scale of the project and the level of technology of the first men. Even modern-day Westeros would struggle to build the wall. According to legend, the wall was built by Brandon the Builder, with the assistance of the Children of the Forest and giants, and it is protected with ancient spells and sorcery. Supposedly, Brandon placed the foundations of the wall along heights wherever possible, so it didn't have to be built so high. Maesters apparently do dispute if the base of the wall was made of stone, but it is generally believed by the builders of the Watch that they used sledges to transport ice cut from the frozen lakes in the haunted forest during construction. The size of the wall makes it near impossible to attack, with several armies of free folk being beaten back by it over the centuries. The first time we as readers start to realise the sheer scale of Westeros is when we first see the wall through the eyes of Tyrion and Jon Snow. On paper, it's really easy to say to the reader that there's this giant ice wall protecting the north from the wildlings and White Walkers beyond it. That is until you realise just how high 700 feet is, and the level of technology Westeros is currently at as a society. For reference, that's somewhere between the height of the pyramids of Giza and the Eiffel Tower, both of which dominate their respective city skylines, even in the modern day. You can imagine just how tall a 700-foot wall of ice would be in a world like Westeros. But the wall itself isn't just very tall, it's long as well, around 300 miles long, which is about the width of the UK at its widest. But given the nature of the wall itself and how it was built, even if by our modern standards it boggles our imaginations, there is a lore reason why it's firstly possible and secondly it fits within the story: magic. Without it, not only would the wall have taken thousands of years to complete, but would have been nigh on impossible to build in the first place. George R.R. Martin has stated in convention panels that he often wonders if he made the wall too high. He first noticed this when writing the Battle of Castle Black in A Storm of Swords, noting how unrealistic it is that the wildlings and Night's Watch would be able to shoot each other from the top and bottom of the wall respectively. While the ranges of medieval style crossbows and longbows can reach 1,000 feet, actually hitting a target at that range for your average bowman is more luck than skill, unless you're letting off a huge volley of arrows at the same time. Plus you also have to factor they would not be shooting forward, but up or down, with the wildlings having a harder time shooting upwards. The wall is huge, and while logistically it has its issues, I think the fact it's made using magic is a perfect reasoning for its size. But more importantly, I think the impact it leaves on the reader and the taste it gives us for the kind of world this story is set in is what makes it so special. Now, something that becomes very clear the more you look into it is that George R. R. Martin tends to use real-world history and locations as inspiration for Westeros, and in the case of the wall, it's directly inspired by Hadrian's Wall near the English and Scottish border, built in 122 AD to defend the Roman Empire from the Scottish tribes to the north. While it is much smaller than George's version, it's a clear example of how George R. R. Martin's world building works. He remembered Winterfell as he'd last seen it, not as grotesquely huge as Harrenhal, nor as solid and impregnable to look at as Storm's End. Yet there had been great strength in those stones, a sense that within those walls a man might feel safe. The news of the castle's fall had come as a retching shock. Tyrion Lannister's thoughts. A Clash of Kings, chapter 54, Tyrion 12. Winterfell is another case where the sheer size of it really doesn't come across till you actually stop and think about it. And we're not just talking about the actual castle itself, but the whole complex, spanning several acres and encircled by two massive granite walls. Winterfell has been built around an ancient godswood and over natural hot springs, meaning that hot water can be piped through the walls and chambers to heat them, making Winterfell more comfortable than other castles during the harsh northern winters. Inside the walls, the complex is composed of dozens of courtyards and smaller open spaces. The Great Keep is the innermost castle and the stronghold of the complex, and is where the living quarters of House Stark are located. The Great Hall is used for receiving guests, and it's a place where the household dines together, including the Lord of Winterfell. It is made of grey stone and has wide doors made of oak and iron which open into the castle yard. Inside it said you can fit 8 long rows of trestle tables, 4 each side of the central aisle, and the hall can seat up to 500 people. The first keep, a squat and round drum tower, is the oldest surviving part of the castle, but is no longer in use, and is still not an original part of it. The Broken Tower, also known as the Burn Tower, was once the tallest watchtower in Winterfell. Over 140 years ago, a lightning strike set it afire and the top third collapsed inward, but no one rebuilt it. There are also many other smaller towers, hosting things such as libraries, the Maester's quarters and the guards' quarters. The castle is also home to a deep, dark crypt and an untouched ancient godswood, taking up about a quarter of the footprint of the castle. But I think what really gets across the sheer scale of Winterfell is its walls, and that's walls plural. As unlike any other castle in Westeros, Winterfell has 2 sets of large stone walls with a deep moat between them, making the castle highly defendable. The outer wall is 80 feet high, while the inner is 100 feet high, which is ludicrously huge, not just from a real-world history perspective, but from a Westerosi history perspective as well. From a quick Google, the tallest castle walls in the United Kingdom are at Farlingham Castle, which are 44 feet tall, which means the outer walls of Winterfell are just about double that height. What's even more impressive about this is, unlike newer constructions in Westeros, such as Harrenhal and the Red Keep, Winterfell is ancient according to legend. Built by Brandon the Builder, who was aided by giants much like the construction of the wall after the Long Night 8,000 years ago. Maces believe Winterfell was built in pieces over different eras, since the ancient Stark kings did not level the ground and planned to use a single structure. Mace the Kennet determined that the first keep, the oldest surviving part of the castle, was built some time after the Andal invasion. Winterfell's inner walls were raised approximately 2,000 years ago, and the outer walls were built during the reign of King Edric Snowbeard. For me, I never truly understood the scale of Winterfell until a few years ago I saw a video by Shadowversity, where he used some 3D software to accurately recreate book Winterfell. When you actually see the scale of it compared to a normal castle, you understand why it's a highly regarded wonder across the world. The book version of Winterfell makes the show version look look like your everyday average castle. But honestly, that's not something I hold against the show, because it's just the practicalities of production, especially with the lower budgets early seasons of the show had. So I do wonder, given its size and connection to Bran the Builder, if maybe Bran used some kind of magic, as he did with the wall, during Winterfell's construction, and how that could play a role in the story going forward. Stone. I must be stone. I must be Casterly rock, hard and unmovable. The thoughts of Tyrion Lannister, A Clash of Kings chapter 54, Tyrion 12. I wasn't sure if to include Casterly Rock in this video, as there's some debate among fans as to if it should really be counted as the tallest structure in Westeros, due to its unique nature and construction. Casterly Rock is carved out of a colossal stone hill beside the Sunset Sea, near where Lannisport is situated today, with the rock being the current seat of the main branch of House Lannister. According to George R. R. Martin, the rock is about 6 miles long from west to east, and is about 2 miles from north to south, with its peak about 2,100 feet high, which makes it 3 times as high as the highest point of the wall, and taller than the hightower of Old Town too. The Casterlys, whom first made the rock their seat, built a ring fort on top of the peak, and as millennia have passed, its natural defences have been expanded with walls, gates and watchtowers carved into the rock itself. The base of the rock contains a large sea-carved cavern with access to the Sunset Sea. The rock has been mined for thousands of years at this point, so there are hundreds of mine shafts in the depths of it, as well as untouched gold veins, which has become the power behind House Lannister. Its face has windows and arrow slits scattered all over it. They look tiny from the outside, but it's only an illusion due to the huge size of the rock. The entire stronghold, tunnels, dungeons, storerooms, barracks, halls, great halls, stables, stairways, courtyards, balconies, gardens, passages, caves, mines, galleries, chutes, wells, barracks, armories, bedchambers, servants' quarters, and so on, all lie within the rock itself. The only exception being the watchtower on the top of the mount that is used by the Maester as a rookery. So while the rock is undoubtedly huge, when talking about the tallest buildings of Westeros, I find it hard to include it. While the others are man-made from the foundations up, Casterly Rock was already a colossal natural formation before any human came to Westeros. While it is a smart move to use the old mining tunnels as a basis of your seat, I don't think you can argue it was built in a traditional sense the way the other great castles in Westeros have been. Again, Casterly Rock is another example of George R. R. Martin taking elements of the real world and scaling them up for Westeros, with Casterly Rock taking inspiration from the Rock of Gibraltar. However, the Rock of Gibraltar is about 2.5 square miles and 1,400 feet tall, while Casterly Rock is about 12 square miles and 2,100 feet tall, which really does put the scale of it into perspective. From where it stood atop the bluffs of Battle Isle, the shadow cut the city like a sword. The thoughts of Pate, A Feast for Crows, prologue. The Hightower is the seat of House Hightower, one of the oldest and most important families of the Reach. It is both a castle and a lighthouse located in the port of Old Town in the southwest Reach, near the border of the Reach and Dawn. It sits atop Battle Isle, where the Honeywine widens into the Whispering Sound. The Hightower is a massive stepped tower with a beacon on top to guide ships to port, with the colour of the beacon's flame changeable, as green flames can be used to call House Hightower's banners. The base of the Hightower is made from a labyrinth square fortress of unadorned black stone, containing gloomy halls, vaults and chambers. The Hightower contains a high hall, with the top of the tower itself housing the apartments of the Lord of the Hightower, with the rest of the family situated below it. While not as deep as the height of the tower, it does possess vaults beneath the black stone foundations. The Hightower is the tallest man-made structure in the Seven Kingdoms, even higher than the 700-foot wall in the north, and the tallest tower in the known world, including all of what we know of Essos. The people of Old Town apparently can tell the time of day by the tower's shadow, and some even claim that the wall can be seen from its top. While Casterly Rock can be claimed to be the tallest building in Westeros, being 3 times taller, and the Eyrie in the Vale sits on the Giant's Lance, which is said to be thousands of meters high, most view the Hightower as the tallest man-made structure, as even the mysterious Blackstone base is man-made, where Casterly Rock has been carved out of a natural formation, and the Eyrie, while impressively built and a marvel of construction, gains most of its height from the Giant's Lance. The foundation of the Hightower is a fortress of black stone of uncertain an origin on Battle Isle. The stone is reminiscent of Valyrian roads and the Black Walls of Volantis. A possible Valyrian origin is supported by the claims of several maesters that Old Town began as a trading post for the ships of Old Valyria, Gis, and the Summer Isles, predating the arrival of the first men to Westeros. The famous Septon Bath claims Valyrians came to Westeros because their priests prophesied that the doom of man would come out of the land beyond the Narrow Sea. In contrast to the Valyrian theory, Archmaester Quillian suggests the fortress was made by the maze makers of Lorath. Maester Theron suggests it was created by the Deep Ones, citing its striking similarities to the Sea Stone Chair and other mysterious black oily rocks around the world. Some small folk believe the Hightower simply just appeared. George R. R. Martin took inspiration from the Lighthouse of Alexandria when developing the idea of the Hightower. While the Lighthouse of Alexandria was damaged badly in earthquakes and left to ruin between 956 and 1323 AD, we do know that it was in the region of about 350 feet tall, which would make the Hightower twice the height of its historical counterpart. Of course, when we're talking about the wall at the start of the video, a key point was the sheer scale of it and how without the use of magic, it would have taken centuries to build. The Hightower does seem to have a more realistic development, starting off as a small wooden tower and slowly growing in increments over the centuries, till we get to the over 700-foot stone tower that dominates the skyline of Old Town today.